Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania. Today's presentation is Building Healthier Place Surfaces. This speaker series is a project of the Education and Outreach Work Group for the Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania, which is a network of organizations and individuals who are concerned about environmental chemicals and how they are contributing to our region's high rates of cancer. Cancer Bridges is co-sponsoring today's webinar. At Cancer Bridges, we provide support for those impacted by cancer, including counseling, support groups, health and wellness classes, family and youth activities, and much more. Our website can be found in the chat. If you happen to get disconnected, please log back into the webinar. If you need technical assistance, please send it via the chat box a message to Danny Wilson or Andre Green. Their names are also listed below in the chat. Also, please enter all of your questions and comments in the chat box throughout the presentation. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available on both Cancer Bridges and Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern PA's website. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Rachel Massey and Linda Pollard. Dr. Rachel Massey is a Senior Science and Policy Advisor with the Collaborative for Health and Environment and a Senior Research Associate with the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. She is outgoing Senior Associate Director at the Massachusetts Toxic Use Reduction Institute, where she led a variety of projects focused on reducing the use of toxic chemicals. She holds a Master's of Science in Environmental Change and Management from Oxford University, a Master's of Public Affairs from the School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University, and a Doctor of Science in the Work Environment from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Lindsay Pollard is a Research Associate at the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Her work includes research on chemical hazards and alternative assessments for consumer and industrial materials. Prior to joining the Lowell Center, Lindsay worked as a researcher at the Massachusetts Toxic Use Reduction Institute, in the field and lab as an aquatic ecologist at Arizona State University and the University of Texas at Austin, Maine Science Institute. She received her Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science degree in biology from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Thank you, Dr. Massey and Lindsay, for being here today.
Thank you so much. I will go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, so thank you so much for having us. Again, I'm Rachel Massey, and Lindsay Pollard and I will be giving this quick introduction to health and environmental hazards associated with artificial turf and certain playground surfacing materials, as well as safer alternatives. We're going to be presenting research that we have done at the Massachusetts Toxic Use Reduction Institute, and we are both now affiliated with the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production. Both the Toxic Use Reduction Institute and the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production are at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. So just to start off with a little context, some of you or many of you may have seen headlines over the years related to concerns about artificial turf and cancer. These concerns were originally brought to light by Amy Griffin, an elite women's soccer coach in Washington State, who was working with some soccer players who were diagnosed with cancer. And as she went to medical appointments with these individuals, she learned about other people who were also suffering with cancer diagnoses, and became concerned about the possibility that young people exposed to many hours of play on artificial turf surfaces could be suffering from increased rates of cancer. Amy actually put together a list of young athletes with cancer, and that list has continued to grow over the years. And she did this in order to form the starting point for a more formal investigation of the possibility of a link between cancer and exposure to these fields. Now, I have to say that unfortunately, although this question has existed now for many years, there still has not been any comprehensive epidemiological study to investigate whether playing on artificial turf fields is associated with an increased risk of cancer. So it's still a really important open question. And so although we don't have the answers to that question, we have a lot of other information about the hazards of some of the materials that are used in these play surfaces, as well as safer alternatives. And so we're going to devote this short presentation to sharing just an overview of what we do know. So what we'll cover briefly today is we'll first talk about athletic playing fields. We will talk about the use of waste tire materials and the carcinogens and other toxic chemicals that can be found in artificial turf components. We'll talk about other concerns such as heat and environmental impacts, and then we'll talk about the safer alternative that we've identified, which is organically or sustainably managed natural grass fields. And then we'll talk a bit about playground surfacing, which raises some of the same issues, some of the same materials are used there. And again, we'll talk about safer alternatives. All of this work is done in the context of the concept of toxics use reduction. So for anybody who isn't already familiar with this, toxics use reduction is a framework for both businesses and communities, and it is the simple idea that whenever possible, we want to look for opportunities to reduce or eliminate the use of toxic chemicals. So this is a way to protect human health and the environment and to achieve efficiencies and cost-saving opportunities. Over the years, we have done lots of projects with large and small businesses that are finding ways to reduce their use of toxics and improve product quality and save money in the process. And this is also true for many environmental and health issues that come up at the community level. Toxics use reduction is a form of primary prevention of disease. So if you take away the toxic chemical, for example, a carcinogen, then you don't have to ask all those other questions about how much exposure people have, whether there is increased risk of cancer in a community associated with that exposure. And you don't have to ask these difficult questions of what level of excess cancer is acceptable in our community. So moving on to some specifics about artificial turf. Here are just a couple of images to give you some background concepts. As you see in the upper image, artificial turf is a multi-layered product. So you've got that top layer where you have the artificial turf grass blades, and then below that there's often a layer of infill. So these are small pieces of rubber or plastic or other materials that help to keep the grass blades in place and provide cushioning. Below that, there's often a shock absorbing surface, and then there are drainage layers below that. And in the lower image, you can see a place where an artificial turf field is in the process of being installed. One of the big concerns over the years has been related to the use of waste tire materials in artificial turf. So many existing artificial turf fields have waste tire or tire crumb as that infill layer. In these images on the slide, you can just kind of get a sense of the life cycle of waste tires. For a variety of reasons, a large quantity of waste tires are generated every year in this country, and most are not recycled to become new tires. So at the top, you can see an image of a waste tire processing facility where the tires are being ground up and made into shreds or smaller pieces of tire crumb. And then down at the bottom of the slide, you can see some of the ways in which that tire crumb or tire shreds could be used. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a photo that I took a couple of months ago of a playground that has tire shred surfacing. So you can see the tire shreds intermingled with the fall leaves. In the middle, you can see artificial turf with a little cloud of tire crumb. And then on the left-hand side, you can see a nicely landscaped garden area where instead of earth or or grass, you see waste tire materials. And this is just a screenshot we took earlier today of some marketing that's being done again for some of these waste tire materials. So tires are a complex product and they contain a lot of ingredients. When tires are made, of course, they contain natural and synthetic rubber. They also contain many fillers. And then there are lots of other chemicals that provide a variety of functions to give you the final product that you're expecting. And that includes antioxidants, anti-ozonants, and others. And there are many chemicals of concern included in that mix. So just a couple of examples are metals such as lead or zinc, polyaromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs, many of which are carcinogens. EPA did a literature review several years ago about chemicals found in tire crumb, and they identified more than 350 chemicals that had been discussed in the literature up until that date, and additional chemicals have been identified since that time. There are also many other materials that are marketed as alternative infills for artificial turf. So you see some pictures of those here. There are alternative rubber products, alternative plastic products, and then various mineral or plant-based options. And we have done a fair bit of research on these alternative materials. And basically what we've found is that there isn't any material that is completely free of concerns. So many of these materials do contain lower levels of the chemicals of concern compared to tire crumb, either smaller numbers of those chemicals or lower concentrations. But again, none of them is completely free of concerns. You may also be familiar with per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. These are chemicals that unfortunately have been in the news quite a lot in recent years. They are highly persistent in the environment. They are often referred to as forever chemicals. And there are thousands of these individual chemicals. So it's a large class, and they have a variety of adverse health effects. Unfortunately, due to their use in many settings, these chemicals are now widespread contaminants in drinking water. And they have also been detected in artificial turf grass blades as well as other turf materials. Other concerns with artificial turf include environmental effects. So microplastic pollution is one. The infill materials and the grass blades break down over time and form small plastic and rubber particles. There are issues with water and soil contamination with chemicals that can run off from the fields, loss of green space or loss of habitat for small animals, and use of antimicrobials to disinfect the artificial surface. Disposal is also a challenge. Most artificial turf in this country is not recycled. And you can see an image on this slide of a stockpile of waste artificial turf just piled up in rolls. Heat is also a substantial challenge. In warm, sunny weather, artificial turf can get extremely hot. And finally, injuries are a concern. And for example, athletes who fall or slide on artificial turf can develop serious skin abrasions, which then can lead to serious skin infections. So I'll stop there with my quick overview of these concerns. And I'll just again note that although there are still open questions about whether athletes who have played for many years on artificial turf have increased risk of cancer, and there is an urgent need to really examine that question, even without having an answer to that question, we know a lot about the chemicals that are present in the turf, and we know a lot about safer alternatives. So we don't need to answer those epidemiological questions in order to work to adopt safer alternatives. So I will now hand it over to Lindsay. And Lindsay, I'm giving you control of the screen now.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel just mentioned, we, along with looking at artificial turf, we also wanted to spend time looking at the safer alternative, which we found is natural grass athletic fields, specifically using organic or sustainable management practices for their maintenance. And the management practices are really geared towards building a healthy soil and grass ecosystem, both to create a resilient play space that can withstand any amount of play that's needed, and also to be more resilient against pests. So reducing the need, reducing or eliminating the need for pesticides. And to help us better understand how communities are actually maintaining these natural grass fields with these types of sustainable practices, and to understand how successful those practices are in creating a resilient play space. We put together some case studies, and we documented fields in or near southwestern Pennsylvania and also in Massachusetts. And in those case studies, we included information about the types of management practices they were using, the annual costs associated with maintenance, and also included estimates of use hours for the fields in those communities. And those case studies are available online if you'd like to view those in detail. And I'll just give a really brief overview of what these sustainable management practices look like. So when putting those case studies together, we spent a lot of time with the grass consultants that were hired to create a maintenance plan for those communities. And so after talking with all of them, we understood that there are a handful of practices that work really well, and there's a system, a similar system that these consultants use for each field. So that includes diagnosing issues with grass fields, including doing soil testing and doing a survey of the field to look for compacted areas or areas where water is pooling. Also looking for any kind of imbalance in the nutrients in the soil, and then taking that information and changing the maintenance practices. So that could include correcting the amount of fertilizer that's being added to a field, mowing more frequently, and also aerating the soil. And it's a consensus that just adding those 3 practices to a maintenance plan will improve a grass field. And all of this knowledge that we pulled from these consultants that we were talking to, we wanted to put together something for towns or schools that were looking into building an organic maintenance program for themselves. So we have a few resources at the TRAE website, including a fact sheet with information on how to build an organic program, and also some really great videos, including an interview with Chip Osborne, who's a great expert in organic management for grass fields. And I'll just pull one case study example here. This is an example of a field in the borough of Heidelberg, which is in the greater Pittsburgh area. And they had a field at Heidelberg Park, which was in pretty bad shape. There were bare spots. It was really compacted, wasn't a good play space. They hired a grass consultant, and she did some soil testing and improved their maintenance plan by adding more consistent mowing, 2 rounds of aeration, seeding, and fertilizing. And by the following spring, there was a really drastic improvement to the field, and it was a much better space to play. So that's a summary of the work that we've done on athletic fields and playing fields. And now I'll move on to the playground surfacing. So we, like with artificial turf, we dove into this topic because of the questions that we were getting from communities and schools specifically about the synthetic materials that are used on playground surfacing. And as we dove into the subject, we were seeing a lot of overlap in materials used on both artificial turf and playground materials. And so playgrounds are typically, they're surfaced with either loose fill materials such as wood chips or rubber mulch, like in the pictures that Rachel showed previously, and or as a unitary surfacing. And an example of that is pour in place. And that's, you can see that in the pictures here, the green solid surfacing underneath the equipment. And they pour in place like artificial turf, and some of the other synthetic options will also have the multiple layers of material. And so we also, along with the overlap of materials, we also see some similarities in the other concerns as artificial turf. So these synthetic playground surfacing materials can get really hot in warm, sunny weather. We also can see there tend to be issues with those surfacing materials breaking down and releasing rubber particles into the environment. This is a table from our playground surfacing report, just to give you a visual of the different options that we assessed. And so we can see, because there are similarities in those synthetic materials used in artificial turf, we also see that there are similar health effects associated with the chemicals that are used in those materials, such as carcinogens, endocrine disruptors. And this is especially notable for the loose fill rubber options that can be made with waste tire. And it's especially notable for those loose fill because kids can pick them up, they can chew them, they can take them with them, and they can just sort of bury themselves into that material a bit more. So there's just more, exposure. And out of these options, we found that a safer alternative to those synthetic materials on playground surfacing are the options made with wood, specifically that have been tested to be free of chromated copper arsenate. And so that can include wood chips or wood mulch. And one other option that's a really good one is the engineered wood fiber, because it's made specifically for playgrounds. It's accessible and ADA compliant, and it's also an affordable option compared to synthetic surfaces such as pour in place. And so backing up a little bit and looking at play spaces as a whole now, it's really important to consider a number of questions when making decisions about what kind of materials to include on either athletic fields or on playgrounds. And so we put together this list of questions that residents can ask of the decision makers for their schools or towns, or that can be asked of vendors. And I will say that with the questions about the chemical constituents, it can be a bit complicated. Vendors will, they may give some information on the chemical ingredients used in those materials, but typically they won't disclose a full list. And we wanted to highlight a few other really great resources. We've noted two here that are local to Pittsburgh. Women for a Healthy Environment has really great resources about artificial turf on their website. Phipps Conservatory has a really nice organic landscaping course available. Some other resources, there are tons of great artificial turf athletic field playground materials on the Turi website. Mount Sinai also has a lot of resources on artificial turf. they also host the Healthy Playing Surfaces website, which is has a ton of information from many different groups on grass and artificial turf fields, non-toxic neighborhoods, and finally, Healthy Building Network. We help them build a hazard spectrum for athletic fields, which is a really great visual for lots of information. So it's the information for each one of these options for athletic fields is compiled underneath these drop-down menus. It's a really great resource. So we want to thank you for listening, and we really hope that this information is helpful to parents and residents and decision makers that are having to make choices around this, around what type of material to use for these play spaces. And hopefully these resources and this information can really help you consider a number of different questions while making these choices, and also help parents or any other concerned residents be champions for those safer alternatives. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Massey and Lindsay. Audience, if you haven't already done so, you can enter your questions into the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and just start some of the ones that we have, and we'll answer as many as time allots. So first question I have is, do you know anything about comparative cost of replacing an artificial turf field with grass?
Okay, I'll start. I think the short answer is I don't think that we have recent numbers for replacement of an artificial turf field with grass. We can say as a general matter that whenever you put in an artificial turf field, that is going to create costs that you'll then incur at the end of the useful life of that field, because the field generally lasts 8 to 10 years and then needs to be replaced. In terms of the cost of installing a grass field, actually, sorry, we do have some cost figures in some of our published materials for a variety of grass fields of varying qualities. So I don't have them off the top of my head, but we can direct you to the fact sheets that have those figures. And of course, when you install a natural grass field, then you don't have that difficulty of having to replace it at the end of life. And certainly if you make that investment up front in installing a high quality natural grass field with good drainage, then you're making an investment in something that will last indefinitely. And in addition, if you use organic or sustainable management techniques, that reduces your costs over time as you build a healthy soil and root system. So, sorry, Lindsay, do you want to pick up from there? And I also see there are probably lots of people on this call who can jump in with more details as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had several people reach out to us about this specific question recently. We don't, like Rachel was saying, we don't have the exact figures of replacing artificial turf with grass, but there is a wide range of options available for grass. So it's sort of a tough question to answer in general, or very generally, but it's definitely something that can be answered. It's a question that can be answered by a consultant that is specialized in athletic fields. So we really suggest that anyone, any town or school that's looking into doing any kind of renovation to their field, talk to a grass specialist, even if you're also looking at artificial turf, to have a personalized understanding of what the cost will be for installation.
Okay. Do you have any links to any of the DOH criticisms?
So that's a question about the Washington Department of Health, I think. Is that?
From Craig? Craig, do you want to expand or?
Yeah, someone just mentioned that there were criticisms of the DOH report, and I was just wondering sort of what those were and if you have any links to those.
Yeah, so right, so the Washington Department of Health put out a report on their investigation of Amy Griffin's list of athletes with cancer. And what they did is they looked at that informally developed list and they compared it with a rough calculation that they did of the possible number of cancers that could arise in that population in general. So they didn't do they didn't do any active identification of cases. They didn't do an actual epidemiological study. There were some criticisms of their original report because they didn't make all of those limitations of their work clear in the original version of their report. And there is a letter that was written by a couple of epidemiologists about that report, which you can find linked through the TURI website. We can put the link into the chat to make it a little easier to find. And also, the Washington Department of Health did reissue their report with a new introduction where they were more clear about the limitations and where they said explicitly that they had not examined the question of whether playing on artificial turf fields is associated with increased risk of cancer. So there was a fair bit of confusion around the initial release of that report, and there were headlines that suggested in the press that they had found an absence of a link. And then when they reissued the report, they tried to make it clearer that they really hadn't ever looked into the possibility of a link, so they hadn't answered that question. So yeah, so let me know if I should try to clarify further, but I'll put that link into the chat. And Mia, I don't know if maybe you also want to just have us create a list of links to send out after this call, if that would be helpful for people.
Great. Yes, thank you. Do you have data on chemical leaching from playground surfaces, microplastic dispersion, and are there any web pages dealing with this issue?
Okay, I'll take a crack at it. Let's see. So we have not done our own research on leaching, but there is plenty of information available. For example, there were some Connecticut studies a number of years ago that looked in detail at chemicals leaching off of fields containing tire crumb infill. On microplastics, there's actually a lot of just photographic evidence of the ways in which artificial turf fields come apart over time. So the grass blades disintegrate, and you can find little pieces of infill and of grass blades in a wide area surrounding the fields. And this is also the case with playgrounds. You can see little bits of those playgrounds that get dispersed into the surrounding environment. So some of those photographs are available on our website, and some are available on other sites that are probably showing up now in the chat. I think I see a few things coming through. I don't know if there's a website that is specifically devoted to the microplastic topic. Again, there might be a resource that I'm not thinking of. Anyway, So happy to look for additional links
Okay.
and send them around afterwards.
Is there a comparison to types of turf fields? For example, AstroTurf used for field hockey fields does not use crumb rubber compared to the fields you commonly find for soccer or football.
Does that mean there's no infill used or just no crumb rubber?
That was from Julie. Julie, do you want to expand?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if there was any type of comparison of different types of the AstroTurf field. So for, I only know from experience of playing field hockey, but it doesn't appear that there's any type of crumb rubber infill. It's more of just the AstroTurf itself, but there are ones that also include, silica or sand-based infill.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of looking into the sand issues, and so if the sand is freshly fractured industrial sand, then that can pose concerns related to can pose an inhalation hazard. There are also some fields that use zeolite, and that is a serious concern related to respiratory hazards. In terms of fields that might not have any infill, that are just kind of more of a hard surface, then I guess you wouldn't have the specific concerns related to the infill, but there would still be the concerns related to chemicals in the carpet product itself. And of course, if you don't have that cushioning, then there may also be additional issues related to injuries. But we definitely don't have expertise on the different types of sports and how that may vary by sport.
How does grass compare for heat, hardness, and disposal compared to every variant of artificial turf? I understand every artificial turf needs to be disposed of at end of life and none full life recycled. No grass field is a disposal issue, heat issue, or hardness issue, right?
Is there too much noise in the background right now? On my end?
I'm not hearing
Okay.
anything.
Okay, good. So I'll just answer this. So in terms of heat, so the synthetic materials, is compared to asphalt. It's going to get hotter. And we were really comparing this to grass. So grass it's going to be less hot, especially looking in sunny areas. For compaction or hardness, that is a concern for grass fields that are underperforming. So if they're not maintained properly, then they will be too hard to play on, and they could be there could be a risk of injury. So we know that properly maintained grass fields are aerated and there's a good balance of organic matter and organic material that will help create a softer cushioned play space. And it is important to test for impact. It's called impact attenuation annually. That's actually recommended for artificial turf and grass fields. So that's really testing the compaction of the field to find out how well it's preventing injuries when athletes are falling on it. I think there was one other piece in that question.
I think you got it.
Oh, disposal, I think.
Disposal, yeah.
Right. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer the question about this, or how to compare the disposal with grass fields, you're you can use the native soil. You can add more or add sand if needed to help with water filtration. But I mean, if we're talking about disposal, artificial turf is something that has to be incinerated or landfilled, where grass could be, if they're tearing up a huge area, it could possibly be composted or used elsewhere.
Okay, this one I think is also kind of related. Has anyone done a life cycle analysis for GHG emissions for natural gas versus artificial turf?
That was probably for natural grass, is that right?
Yes. Sorry.
Rachel, do you have any idea? I mean, we can talk about, I think it's, yes, there are probably, I'll just stay on the grass. There are probably some emissions. I mean, it's not zero from the soil. But if we're talking about a life cycle assessment of artificial turf, we have to include the materials that are being manufactured, what it takes to manufacture those, what it takes to transport those materials for installation and then for disposal, what happens during the disposal, and how it's breaking down or how it's incinerated. So that's it. I'm not sure if that's been done. Rachel, do you know?
So, yeah, so I see actually some references are being added in the chat. Thank you very much. So I guess just to sort of take a high level view of this, if you're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, climate change concerns, and climate change resiliency, any time that you build a healthy and resilient natural grass ecosystem that is supporting healthy management of water systems, and it's reducing heat because the grass is naturally cooling, and you've got carbon fixation that's going on in the soil, and you're not dealing with a disposable product. So from all of those perspectives, natural grass is, in a just very straightforward way, is much more sustainable and climate friendly. And then plastics can emit greenhouse gases, and I think that a link was put into the chat about a couple of analyses that have been done, one looking at methane emissions, and one looking at greenhouse gases more generally. So I think that I don't know that a formal life cycle analysis has been done, but if you think about the life cycle of plastics in general, they contribute to the global warming problem, whereas investing in healthy soil and healthy plant ecosystems helps us to be more resilient and combat those climate change effects.
Are there any studies showing a correlation between PFAS blood levels and artificial turf use?
I don't think that's been researched, and honestly, we really shouldn't have to do research on that. So there are so many ways in which people are unfortunately exposed to PFAS, and unfortunately, there is a great deal of research that now needs to be done on levels of PFAS in people's bodies associated with a whole range of exposures. So I would say, it's being researched in many industries and in many areas of activity. And to have to add an additional factor of having to check young people for PFAS in their bodies associated with a play space, I think goes against all the principles of primary prevention and of toxic use reduction.
What is your recommendation for indoor sporting facilities where installation of real grass is not feasible?
That's a great question. And so one thing that we can say is the research on artificial turf shows higher levels of air contamination when artificial turf is used indoors. So all those rubber and plastic particles that get into the air and the off-gassing from the rubber materials, if that's happening in an indoor environment, then that's all trapped and can't be blown away by the outdoor air. So artificial turf is definitely a very concerning option when used indoors. We haven't researched other indoor materials, so I don't think we can make those recommendations, but we certainly have seen a lot of literature on the air quality problems that result from using artificial turf indoors.
Artificial turf seems to be an unregulated pollutant. Is there an opportunity to petition for administrative rulemaking so that these contaminants can be properly regulated?
I think that is something that is being explored in a number of communities. Certainly, many municipalities have looked at potential regulation of artificial turf, and it's also being explored at the state level in some states. There has also been some work to look at extended producer responsibility, where the manufacturers would be required to find ways to manage the waste at end of life. So yes, there are regulatory approaches that have been explored at the municipal and state levels. And again, people who are on this call, just from what I'm seeing in the chat, may want to chime in on that as well.
Can you discuss the pesticides use associated with natural grass fields and associated concerns?
So there are concerns with pesticides, and what we were really hoping to convey in our resources and all of our work was that there's a way to avoid those as well. So avoiding the hazards around turf, as well as eliminating the need for pesticides. So in the work that we've done with the communities and our case studies, and talking with consultants, they have they found that they don't need to use pesticides once their grass fields are working well and the soil is healthy. So yes, pesticides use is a concern, and but there is also a way around that. So,
and then adding to that question, how about pesticides use associated with artificial grass fields?
I just want to jump in and add something to what Lindsay was saying. Or maybe just to further emphasize, the communities that we have worked with that have invested in their natural grass fields have conceived of that work as creating organic natural grass fields. But also the term organic sometimes kind of scares people off. And if you're trying to purchase all organic products, some of those might be quite expensive. So it's just important to understand that if you want to do natural grass management without pesticides, you can simply adopt a set of sustainable techniques with or without purchase of certified organic products. So it's a very practical, affordable option that works very well. So there's really no need to do pesticide intensive management of natural grass fields. So we've already conveyed that. I just wanted to say it again. On the question of pesticide use on artificial turf, in many cases, there is a maintenance specification for artificial turf products that requires the use of antimicrobials to disinfect that surface. I have heard anecdotally about cases in which herbicides have been applied to artificial turf to control natural grass that somehow started to grow there, but I don't know how common that is. So I guess that's what I can think of.
Do you have research on concerns with flooding? We have seen major flooding in my area in the Midwest with homes destroyed. They are not in typically flood-prone areas. Since artificial turf is an impervious surface, could ordinances related to limiting impervious surfaces help to push schools and municipalities to maintain grass fields?
So I think in terms of water management, both artificial turf and natural grass fields can be built with appropriate drainage. When you have flooding in an area with artificial turf, you have to think about the particles that will be carried off the field in that flood water, which may not be captured by filters. And there's lots of documentation of wetlands and areas near artificial turf getting contaminated with large quantities of tire crumb, for example, that came off fields during flooding events. Lindsay, anything you want to add?
And that's something to think about with snow removal as well, in terms of water and some form helping move those particles off of the field and into wetlands or into the environment. That's one option that artificial turf, the marketing will tell you that you can remove the snow and then keep playing during the winter, but just be aware that you will remove rubber particles when you do that. As far as flooding with grass, if it's maintained well, the filtration will work well too, to let the any standing water move through the soil. This is a good natural filtration system as well, especially compared to artificial turf.
Has there been documented evidence linking PFAS in groundwater to PFAS leaching from artificial turf? Also, do all artificial turf products contain PFAS?
On the second part of that question, I am not aware of any artificial turf product that is free of PFAS. I know there is some marketing around that, but from what we've seen so far, the testing, if you do a total organic fluorine test or another test that checks for the presence or absence of all PFAS, they are found to be present in the turf materials. And the question of runoff into surrounding water is being actively investigated. So I think the experts on this are very concerned about runoff occurring, and they're still gathering data about it.
Great.
And I'll add one more piece to that. We've had at least one community who's we've been working with one community that's really having issues with PFAS contamination in their drinking water and trying to figure out how to deal with that. And they reached out to us to ask about this PFAS and artificial turf question. as they considered replacing their existing field with a new artificial turf one. And so they're not really sure. Another question from them was, you know, what could be a major source of our PFAS contamination? And so our response to them was, again, on that toxic use reduction within that framework, it's especially if your town is already having these major contamination issues with PFAS. And as far as we can see right now, there doesn't seem to be an option available for artificial turf that's PFAS free. But there are other, you know, there's grass that could, you know, maybe that could work instead. So just again, shifting from looking for an artificial turf field that's free of PFAS to something that is, you know, safer all around.
Oh, lost where I was.
I'll just add one more quick comment about PFAS, just for anybody on this call who is planning to look into this issue and is new to it. It's just helpful to be aware that the communication around PFAS can get pretty confusing. And this is partly because PFAS is such a broad class of chemicals. And so sometimes a test may be conducted that looks for a small subset of chemicals that are PFAS. And if that small subset of chemicals are not found in the material, then that may be interpreted to mean that the material is PFAS free, when it's not actually PFAS free. It's just free of that small handful of chemicals. So that's just something to kind of have in mind if you're getting into this issue for the first time. And another thing, again, to be aware of is that the way the testing is done is very important. So for example, if you're looking at leaching from artificial turf, you have to make a careful selection of the chemical that is used in the leaching test, because if you don't make appropriate choices, then you just may not pick up the chemicals that are present and that are actually a leaching concern. So again, just things to research before you delve into any testing project.
Danny, I lost my document. If you're there, I know there was another question. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. It looks like we have time maybe for one more question. And there was a really interesting one about the politics of schools. It seems like possibly an equity question, that want artificial turf because they can't hold playoffs or students feel there's unfair conditions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a big and important issue. One thing that I'll say is that the debates about artificial turf, I think initially were occurring primarily in communities with a lot of resources, and artificial turf has been seen kind of as a premium product, and has been seen as perhaps the most desirable way to provide a safe and adequate play surface for young people. And I guess in that debate, sometimes the hazards to the health of the athletes are not necessarily taken into account. Increasingly, we're seeing cases in which there's a significant donation being offered, where there's a private donor offering to cover the expenses of an artificial turf field. And again, sometimes this is done with a lack of information about the concern that the installation of that field could actually add to the health and environmental hazards to which young people may already be exposed. So in terms of equity issues, having municipal investment in actual green space, in natural grass play spaces that will provide a better air quality situation for the players is a really important thing to consider. And Lindsay, do you want to jump in?
I'll add that as far as, you know, thinking about what is the best playing field in terms of performance. I know I've been seeing that there's this big push in professional athletic leagues or groups of players in professional athletic leagues that are really pushing to use grass instead of artificial turf. It seems to be mostly based on injury rates. But that's, you know, something to think about. It seems like there could be sort of this transition, and we've been seeing this a bit in those suburban areas too, where there seems to be this transition towards possibly moving away from artificial turf as the premium play space to grass fields that are maintained very well. And I'll just note again that there's such a huge wide range of different options for grass playing fields. If there's a huge donation that's available, it could be used to create a grass playing field stadium with all the bells and whistles and tons of extra maintenance equipment that's automated to help maintain those grass fields. So, you know, if we're looking at pricing, if more money equals better play space, there's opportunities for very low investment on grass fields to make a great play space, but also opportunities to make huge investments as well.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for hanging on a couple minutes. Thank you, Dr. Massey and Lindsay, for all the information. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording with the chat, and it'll include all of the links referenced today. Andre just launched a survey. If you could just take a minute and answer that, we would really appreciate it. If you would like to follow us next month, we're going to take a deeper dive into Radon. We hold these webinars the first Thursday of every month at 12 o'clock. If you'd like to get more information about cancer in the environment, please go to their website at censwpa.org. You can find that in the chat as well, and you can receive information regularly from the network. So thank you very much for attending. And again, thank you, Dr. Massey and Lindsay. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for putting all the great information into the chat, for covering all those additional points. Thank you for having us.